Cheap, $220 Tanglewood. Expensive Taylor. This one plays like dragging a rusty anchor over jagged coral. This one plays like lightning skating over slick ice. How do we manage that? Well, let's dive in and we'll see if we can get your dream machine playing like it's a pair of skates infused with lightning skipping over your frozen lake. First thing you're going to need is a few goodies. So we're going to need something to measure your string height with. Now this is not an official string height measuring gauge. This is something I had handy. So if you haven't got anything, you want to do it right now, grab something that has some measuring lines on it. It's got some millimeters, so that's what we need. A couple of good cloths. You may want to oil your fretboard, depending what type of fretboard it is, what wood, how dry it is. Maybe check that out first. And probably some new strings. So these are the Diodario XS Phosphor Bronze. They're coated. It says on the back, never fade away. And I got the 11.5 to 53, so slightly lighter than your standard 12 gauge. Should be slightly easier to play and slightly more sparkly. Now we'll look at the guitar setup. So basically how it plays is going to depend on three basic things. It's going to be here, your saddle at your bridge, probably your nut height here, and of course the truss rod in the neck and the neck angle. Is it curved, straight, going the right way? Then you get your little measuring device and you test how high the strings need to be and you check it out. And if you're a bit high, and if your action's too high, you might need to lower him. And this is what I did here. The first thing to check is your nut height. And if that's too high, you might just need to shave or scrape in between those little grooves there to bring your strings down a little bit. Another thing that I did here was this bridge. This was way too high on the cheap guitar. The strings were ridiculously too high. So after I replaced the strings, I took the strings off, took this out, sanded the bottom of it with some smooth sandpaper, slow process, put it back in, did it a couple of times, and it brought the string height down. I also adjusted the truss rod, which was found in here. It's different on each guitar. And that affects from about your 3rd to your 12th, roughly. That's for your truss rod height. Your nut width height will affect from your 1st third, and your saddle, it's going to affect from about the 12th fret down. So you don't want it too low, or you're going to get some buzzing, but you want it low enough to play nice and easily. Now a lot of times, especially on the cheaper ones, on any guitar, they'll set them up a little bit too high so people can lower them to their preference. So how do we go about doing that? Well, I've already done it on this one, so I might show you how I do it on the Taylor. If you have an expensive guitar and you've never done it before, you may want to buy a cheap one like me on Marketplace and have a practice run with. And if you buy a cheap second-hand one and you fix him up, you can probably sell him for a little bit more than you paid for him if you don't want him. Or, like me, you can keep it for a beach guitar. It doesn't matter if it gets a little bit of salt and sand on him. But the first thing you want to change is your truss rod. You want to get that set up properly because that could be all you need and could solve every problem. So you set your truss rod up first. Now on this little tool, the truss rod cover is sitting right here. And what I have, this came with it. So that screw unscrews him and a little truss rod there, adjust the truss rod. Let's take off the little truss rod cover. Nice and steady. Slow and steady wins the race. So here's the little truss rod cover. Don't lose it. And you can see the adjustment is in there. So we'll take our little piece and you put it in. And you only do very small turns at a time. Very, very small turns. You might do one little turn like this. Then you'll check your height. And if it's not enough, you come back and you'll check your height again. And you adjust it very slightly at a time. So the first thing I might do is I might check my string height. and you're checking for the low E and the bottom E and all the strings, and you're aiming for about 2.2 millimeters on the low string and about 1.8 on your high E string. And another little test you need to do is it's easy if you put a capo here, or you can use your finger, but over the fret and on the 12th fret, and you just want to have a slight amount of clearance when you fret it on the 12th and the 1st, just a very slight, like a piece of paper slide through. And when that's just a slight amount, like mine is now, that means your truss rod part of the setup is done and it's good. And you put your little cover back on and you're ready to work on either your nut or your bridge. Now I've tested my nut, tested the bridge nut on the guitar, and it's pretty much showing up perfect. You can just get a piece of paper and it'll just slide underneath your strings. You're probably good to go. So gladly, that didn't need changing, but it's still very, very high action down here on this 12th fret. In fact, let's have a look. I'll tell you what it is. Struth. It's over 3 mil. So that's why she's a little bit hard to play. So what I'm going to need to do is change the strings and sound just very, very slightly, slowly as we go at the bottom underneath of this saddle, and try it a few different times. See if she comes up better. I'll also oil the fretboard because just lightly with this F1 oil. This guitar's over 20 years old and it's never been oiled, so very light amount of oil. A fun little fact while I remove these strings, winding them down. They are elixirs and they're over 20 years old as the guitar. I've never changed them, so they're the coated elixirs and they do last. That's why I went with the coated Diodarios. Okay, so the strings are off. Now it's time to give them a little bit of a wipe down, a little bit of a clean. Now when you're using your little cloth, you may want to clean parts that you can't normally reach, like in behind your headstock here, around the sound hole, because you don't normally get there till you remove the strings. Now you grab your oil and you give them a good little shake. Then put a tiny drop on each little fretboard. And you're going to rub it in. Depending on how dry your fretboard is, you might want to leave it there for a minute. You can also grab your little cloth and go over your frets. Get all your frets nice and polished. This here is from one little run over the frets. Just doing this. And you can see all the rubbish coming off. And one little trick, if you get your fingernail, you put it over your cloth and you run your fingernail over the fret, like here, where the fret meets the fretboard. Look at that rubbish. Go over each fret, front and back with your fingernail. Get it nice and spick and span. So the fretboard, as you can see, is looking nice and shiny and smooth. The frets are smooth, everything's done, and we're ready to adjust the saddle. Take a look at how the bone has aged. You can see the part that's been sticking out, the part that's been under the guitar, so it's a little bit interesting. All you need to do is get your light gauge sandpaper, make sure it's dead flat. Hold this so you've got even pressure all the way through. You want to have even pressure because you want to make sure this gets an even sand underneath this line here. And you just simply, you make a start, back and forth, and you only do a little bit at a time. I'm only doing an extra little bit because I put in a lighter gauge string, and that's going to probably release the tension on the neck a bit and lower the gauge a little bit as it is. So I'm just going to do a real light gauge, string it up, check it. And probably pop the back of the strings out and take a little bit more off. Some sanding time, takes a while. Take the time, a little bit by a little bit. If you do mess it up, you can probably order a new one, but you don't want to do that. Slow and steady will win this race. Now, putting in your strings, you simply open your packet, pull out your strings, you grab your little piece, and you want to make sure when you put it in, so when you sit in your little pin, you got to use the groove. Don't know if you can even see the groove, but trust me, there is a groove. And at the end of this, when they're all in, you want to put your hand under and just make sure it's sitting up tight against the pin when you pull it through. Now whack all these in. I always keep these little pegs, these little pins in order, the exact same order that they came in, just in case there's a slightly different variant. And another thing I always do with strings, I'm not sure if anyone else does, is safety precaution. I always wear glasses just to prevent a one-off million chance you get a string in the eye, which wouldn't be very fun. Now I'm just going to press down and check that they're all secure. Push these all in underneath. You can feel the little pin. They all feel good to go, and you just kind of check them as you're going. So I like to put the string in. So you pull your string through till it's tight. Hold it at about the second tuner, pull back, and there's your slack. Now with that slack, I usually like to loop over this little tuner head and start on the outside from out here, and whoop, that finger, start on the outside and move into the inside when you do your first wrap, and pull this up and wind so it goes underneath and it locks it in place. Looped over the top. A little bit of swearing. Always a little bit of swearing. Pasted by a winder. And this is the kind of look that we end up with. One string over the top and the other two underneath. So as you can see here, that's sitting above 3 mil at the 12th fret. And you probably want that somewhere between 2 to 2.4, depending on how you want to play your guitar. So I'm going to have to take a little more off the saddle. How did you come up? Well, on the high E, we're sitting at about 1.9 mil from fret to string, and on the low E, about 2.1 mil. Now, that's pretty low. The lowest sort of recommendation I've heard is 5/64 and 4/64. Now that's a little bit lower than this one again, but I couldn't go any lower because of a couple of things. I'll come back to a really important one in a moment. One is my saddle. I sanded it down as much as I could go. You can see there it's quite low now. It's only about 2.5 mil. That's probably even lower than ideal. You probably want to have about 3 mil space between the top of your bridge to the bottom of your string. Now, I just did it anyway because I wanted to have the low action. But the reason why you want to have a bit of a height there is because you want to have a break angle from where your saddle comes down towards your pin. You're going to have an angle to give you the right kind of acoustics coming out of your guitar. Now the reason why you might be wondering why it's like that is because it probably needs something expensive done to it, a neck reset. Now neck reset, I'll take the neck off and I'll tilt it back just a fraction, and that will bring the action down without having to possibly even shave much of your saddle head. But it's very expensive. On a tailor, I'd be a bit lucky because they bolt on, so I'll probably save a bit of cash, but I didn't really want to spend the cash at this stage because I'm probably not worth the spending my money on my playing. But that has got the action down perfectly. But maybe in a year's time, if I buy some new strings, I could lash out, get the neck reset, and you'll put a new saddle in, and then it'll play pretty much the way it plays right now, just about the saddle being shaved. and it'll have a little bit more of a break angle. Sometimes too much of a break angle, it can sound too harsh, not enough. It can sound a bit tinny, a bit dead. You need to have the right amount, so that's why eventually you got to get a neck reset. Now, so if you're looking for an old guitar, what you want to look for if you need a new neck reset, before you spend a lot of money, because it can cost a fortune, maybe not even worth it, you can get a straight angle, a straight edge. You can get a straight edge and run them all down your frets, and it should come to about 1/2 mil just above your bridge plate. That's a pretty good guide. Another guide, what you want to do, even better again, is you just look at your string height on your 12th fret. Let's say if it's pretty high, like 3.5 mil, and then you look at your string height here from your saddle to your bridge plate, and that's already shaved down like mine to 2.5 mil. That's it, you're done, you're cooked. You can no longer adjust it anymore. You're going to need a neck reset. So you need to calculate in, if you're buying that guitar, that could cost you a lot of money, depending on where you live. If it's a Taylor though, bear in mind it could be a little bit cheaper. But you want to check that out. If it's, you look at your guitar and it's about 2.8 mil here, and you got 4 mil here, then you can say, okay, cool, I don't need a neck reset, I can just adjust a little bit and get this super low action. The big question is, how does she play? How does she sound? Well, she plays like butter, slipping over lightning. And how does she sound? Well, that may depend on whether I'm playing it or whether Tommy Emmanuel is playing it.